Thank you for joining us. I am Felicity Ezuike. There was news on Sunday that the United Arab Emirates, UAE, has joined the bandwagon of global superpowers scrambling to gain commercial influence in Africa. Over the past decade, according to the report, the UAE has emerged as the fourth largest investor globally into Africa after China, Europe, and the US. Around this time last year, August 14 to be precise, the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, began a 5-day, 3-nation trip to South Africa, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Rwanda. This was just as the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, was rounding off her trip to Uganda, Ghana, and Cape Verde. These trips came on the heels of Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's visit to Africa. Lavrov had paid a 4-nation visit to Egypt, Ethiopia, Uganda, and the Republic of Congo. And China's foreign minister also began 2022 with a 4-day visit to Eritrea, Kenya, and the Comoros, keeping a 32-year tradition that the country's top diplomat make his first trip of the year to Africa. Not to be left out, France joined the fray at the same time that Lavrov was in Africa. I think you get the picture now. Political commentators agree that if Africa handles the news scramble wisely, the main winners will be Africans themselves. They point to engagement with the outside world as mostly positive, as more competition will help the continent's economy. On one slot today, we'll make an attempt to find out how true these assertions are and explore how Africa can make this scramble beneficial to her right and her people. That's after this short break. This half of the show is Dr. Z.N. Iraqi, a professor of economics at the University of Nairobi. He joins us live from Nairobi. Thank you very much for speaking with us.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing great. So I read a piece that, kind of put holes on the phraseology, a new scramble for Africa. It wondered whether those still using the phrase are reading the African situation correctly, and whether indeed the current formation in the region warrants the tag of scramble, so to speak. How do you respond to this framing in the light of what we know?
It's an interesting question because when you're in high school, primary school, up university level, we all read about the Scrabble for Africa, the Bahrain Conference of 1884, the Bahrain Conference of 1886. And in about 100 years ago, Africa was subdivided. The French took West Africa, the British took Southern Africa, the Italians took the Horn of Africa. Africa was divided up. So there was a new Scrabble, but by then Africans were helpless. So when we talk about the new Scrabble for Africa, it is very close to that one. The only difference now is what is being scrabbled for. By then it was virgin territory. By then it was about which country was more powerful. But the new Scrabble now is about bigger issues, the minerals, the new market, and the Africa's big arable land. And we cannot forget that Africa has a very young population. So the Scrabblers see Africa as a territory, a virgin that is yet to be exploited, not through the gun, but now through the economy. So it's a correct definition of Scrabble for Africa, only that the Scrabble now is different.
One would think that since the purpose seemed to have evolved, it is now Africans are wiser, so to speak, on how to go about getting benefits from this interaction. Maybe we should come up with a new phraseology that doesn't seem to put Africa at the receiving or victim end of things.
I wish you had told me earlier because I've not heard about a new phraseology that can describe what is happening. But I'll probably not use the word Scrabble. I would probably say the new competition for the heart and soul of Africa. Whether you look at East, West, North, everybody wants to have a part of Africa. And what is interesting now is whether everybody, even like smaller countries like UAE, want to have a piece of Africa. But I think what makes this Scrabble very unique is the number of players. By that time, 1884, 1886, or just European. Now you have the Chinese, you have the Arabs, and they are all scrabbling for the same continents. The only difference now, there's no violence. It's through negotiations, through winning seller, winning buyer. They're saying, this is what we can give Africa. But what I want is Africa to stand up and say, this is what you are giving us, but this is what we are getting. So I want this new scrabble for Africa to be different from the one that took place 100 years ago, in that Africans can now negotiate so that it can be a win-win situation, not winners and losers.
Okay, there are three main names that come up all the time, and over the years they've been engaged in heavy diplomatic efforts. There's been highs, there's been lows. I'm talking about the United States, China, and Russia. They've really struggled to recruit and maintain allies in Africa. But then China's economic strength and its determination to take out United States as a global pedestal, the figure that it has. This competition in itself, I mean, you look at it and you wonder, is it really about what is good for Africa, or it is a power play between these big nations? And to add to that, is it really a good thing for Africa?
If you look at the history of Africa, long before the three powers came, US, China, and Russia, we had other powers that have been here much earlier. We had the UK, we had France, we had Portuguese, we had the Spanish. They have been here much longer than the three powers. So for these three powers to dislodge the previous owners of the African continent, if I can use that word, is a bit difficult. Look at the language, look at the religion, look at the cultures. So if a culture has been here for the last 100 years, it becomes very hard to dislodge it. So the people in Kenya talk English, the people in Angola talk Spanish, the mannerism, the food, everything is according to the former colonial power. So when US and China and Russia come to Africa, they are finding it a very hard nut to break because these are newcomers. And as these countries come to Africa, there's always the memory of colonialism, what colonialism did to this country. And that's why they are coming up in another very diplomatic way. So the US is coming, wait a minute, we are going to help you entrench democracy. China is saying, we are going to come and build your infrastructure. Russia is coming and saying, which is very strange, that we are going to come and help you dislodge the former colonial powers, particularly in the French West Africa. But at the heart of it, they look very benevolent. But I think they also have their strategic interest at the back of their mind.
Okay, analysts say Africa, to turn away from China at this point, there seems to be a competition, but to turn away from China at this point will be difficult because of the many things that they are enjoying, especially financial largesse. Is there any truth in this statement, or do you think that Africa should not be so penned towards China, but to explore as openly as it has accepted the largesse from China, other parts of the world?
I think my argument would be very simple. Africa should be able to engage with anybody who is willing to engage with Africa in beneficial way. So if Chinese come and convince us that they have something good for Africa, we should engage with them. If UAE comes and shows us they have something tangible and something positive for Africa, we should engage with them. If US come and say the same, or Europeans come and say the same, we should do that. So I don't think we should be one-sided. In fact, one reason why the original scrabble for Africa was very dangerous is because it was one-sided. But now, Africa as it is, we can have benefits from all the suitors. So if Chinese come with something, let's take it. If Americans come with something, let's take it. If whoever comes to Africa with something positive, let's embrace them. But it should be at our own terms. And the biggest advantage we have now, as opposed to 100 years ago, is that we can negotiate. In fact, my suggestion is all these powers should not negotiate with individual countries. We have certain institutions that have been built that we can negotiate with these powers. African Free Trade Area, African Union, East African Community, ECOWAS. All these are institutions that can entrench or help us have more bargaining power. But if we negotiate with these powers as individuals, I don't think we are going to be winners.
Like yourself, an associate professor of political science at Leeds University, Tunde Osteni, is quoted as saying that what we call the new scramble for Africa is a continuous search for opportunities. I would like you to paint a picture of what these opportunities look like. Africa is large, so the needs of one part and the other will not be the same.
Interesting question, because I don't think these powers are coming to Africa just to waste their time and to waste their resources. They must be seeing some opportunities. And some of the opportunities come out very clear, include arable land. I know that the Arabs are looking for land in Africa where they can plant crops, they can harvest crops, and ensure there is food security. And that came out very clearly during the COVID, when food supplies were disrupted. Other countries like China are looking for natural resources, whether it is forest, whether it is rare earth metals. And the US is also looking for the same resources. So Africa is rich in resources. There's no question about that. But also very important, they are looking for a market for their goods and services. Remember that Africa is one of the youngest populations. If you look at a country like China, the population is not China, but Russia, the population is decreasing. So it's not just a question of just trying to project your interest or your power, but also what do you get there. So if you look at West Africa, East Africa, there's always something to pick. And that is what these superpowers are after. But they will not say that directly. They use other more diplomatic language in teaching democracy, helping countries develop. But they're not going to say, we are going to get this from this country. And it is the work of Africans to state their position, to negotiate and say, I know this is what you want, but this is also what we need to get from you. Win-win situation.
I mean, you talked about raw material, that's where they are looking at. I mean, the relationship, the dynamics of the relationship that exist in efforts by these superpowers to try and take advantage of what they can from Africa is there. So how can we begin to negotiate, so to speak, so we don't sell and then re-import? Because I don't think that has changed now. We still give out these raw materials and then they do the finished product and we bring them back. So what kind of negotiations should African leaders be looking at to avoid a situation where we continually seem like our raw materials are taken? Some say it's a form of recolonialization, because if they are the ones that have all the answers. So what kind of negotiations should we begin to have when it comes to this?
If you look at the growth of China, the growth of Japan, the growth of Korea, the reason why they have been able to compete with these developed countries is because they invested in science and technology. They were able to get technology to extract their minerals, to refine them. They were able to come up with technology that could help them add value to the raw materials. So one way Africa can be able to negotiate with these countries is to make sure that there's technology transfer, to make sure that more students go study science and technology, so that when we are selling our minerals or whatever products we have, we can tell them, wait a minute, before you buy these items, before you buy this product, we are going to add value. We're going to process our coffee. We are going to refine our gold. We are going to do A, B, C, D for each of the products you want to get from Africa. But if we don't have the technology, then it will be very easy to export raw materials as they are. They will be processed in another country and be exported back. And very important, Africa must become more patriotic. I think we have one problem in Africa. We're always thinking that something that is imported is superior to what is indigenous. If we don't have that same pride, some pride, I'm not saying we go to the extent of Donald Trump who says America first, but I think we need to hear some voices saying Africa first without being labeled as extremists. I think the spirit of Pan-Africanism that was there when Africa got independence should be revived through the African Free Trade Area, so that we always remember that charity starts at home.
In my opening statement, I talked about the new scramble. If we use it wisely, we will be the main winners of it. In that connection, I want to ask your advice. Most times when I have conversations like this, I put it out and ask the caution, the need for caution on loan arrangements that Africa seem to take pleasure in accepting. Sometimes they say it's the longevity of the payback period or the terms and conditions that encourage more of this loan taking. And it looks like most African countries are growing in debt to some of these Western countries. I'd like you to speak on that.
If you're an economist or a financial analyst, you know very well that it is easier to get a loan than to tax people. So if you're a political leader and you want to get money, it is much easier to borrow money from China, from charter organizations, or from other countries. But when you try to tax people so that you fund government services, people resist because there's nowhere in the world where taxing is popular. So African countries must learn how to rely on themselves so that they can raise more taxes. They can reduce the waste that is popular in a lot of governments. So we can reduce the waste if we can tax and make sure that there's no tax leakage, there's corruption. There's no reason why we cannot stop taking all those loans from other countries with conditions. But that needs a lot of political boldness, a lot of political will for people to say we are proud to pay for our services. We are proud not to have a budget deficit, and we are proud to take care of our basic needs. If we don't do that, we shall always be on the losing end when it comes to negotiations. Leaders will always go for debt because it's much easier to get. It does not need a lot of hassles. It does not annoy the voters, which is one reason why loans are very popular. And we need to become even also more responsible because when you get loans, you leave other generations to pay for them. But tax is immediate. And that is why we need a lot of political boldness to say we can have an alternative means of funding our services instead of getting loans from other people or other countries.
Let me bring up another key issue for us to actually get the benefit of these interactions, and that's the question of leadership. It's our bane. African leaders in recent times, some persons are saying that there seems to be some kind of cohesion beginning to appear. It's not a lot. They make reference to the efforts that they put with Russia in case of the crisis, the war that Russia is taking out on Ukraine. My question basically is, in your opinion, has African leaders shown some improvement really in coordinating their negotiations, their interest, so that it will be not just for their individual country, but for the entire continent?
In my opinion, that is Africa's soft underbelly. We are a bit selfish when it comes to individual countries. We like engaging in a bilateral way instead of a multilateral way. And I said earlier, we have a lot of institutions in Africa, but they have not been put into use in this club of Africa, East African Community, ECOWAS, IGAD, African Union, COMESA. All those institutions do not come together and say, this is how we are going to negotiate with the European Union. This is how we are going to negotiate with China. This is how we are going to negotiate with the Arab world. Most countries like negotiating by themselves. So if only we can come together, we would have better bargaining power. We would get a bigger piece. We would take care of our strategic interests. Because when you negotiate as an individual, it's very easy for you to lose. It's very easy for you to be overcome by remember these powers. They're just purely powers. They have the powers. They have the influence. But when you come as a group, it's much easier to negotiate with these powers and get a better deal.
I want to take on a controversial conversation at the moment, and that's the coup that has happened in Niger Republic and the efforts of African leaders to try and restore constitutional leadership. There are those who are talking about outside influence, foreign influence, escalating the situation and continue a rift there. I wanted to talk about this. Is this another instance of foreign influence or scramble for Africa? And what's your assessment of the leadership that's been provided by African leaders so far?
I think Africans have not been forceful enough when it comes to food like in Burkina Faso, in Niger, and other African countries. And sometimes it is very hard for African countries to act because, as we say in my country, it's very hard for a pot to call a sufuria black because both of them are black. So what has happened is, in my opinion, is that in the last, since independence, or since African countries got independence, they have not developed strong institutions. And because they have not developed strong institutions, it becomes very easy for foreign powers, whether it is Russia or which one, to deal with the individuals. And that's why it is very easy for foreign country or foreigners to come and have a coup taking place in another country. But if you had built institutions for the last 60 years, I think it would be very hard for any foreign power come and meddle with our institutions, to come and meddle with our leadership. So African leaders have not done enough. They need to do more. Just as they talked about Pan-Africanism 60 years ago, maybe they need to come up with new Pan-Africanism and make sure that in countries where there are no institutions, the countries are helped to build institutions instead of looking at individuals as the basis of leadership.
All right, before I let you go, I want you to also look at how, for Africans to get the benefit of this scrabble that we're talking about, we need some sort of internal democracy. But as it stands, there seem to be juntas spread across Africa. Do you think maybe we're losing sight of the importance of cohesion in trying to make our efforts, make our demands and our needs come up in this scramble, so to speak, in this conversation with foreign bodies?
Charity starts at home. If a country that doesn't have strong institutions, if a country doesn't have a democratic government, if a country doesn't have well-developed political and economic systems, it is very hard for that country to come and join other countries and start bargaining at the global level. The reason why the European Union has been very successful is because most of the countries that make the European Union are democratic. They are very good systems, political and economic. So when they sit with each other, then they can negotiate, they can talk with one voice. But Africa is very fragmented, right from the time of colonialism. So we have the people who speak French, the people who speak English, and the people who are in between, and so on. So I believe that if countries put their country in order, they have common vision, they have common institutions that are renewed time with over and over again through democratic elections. There's no reason why we are not going to get African leaders who are probably like Mandela and bargain for us at the international level, at the global level, so that Africa can get what it deserves. And that is possible.
Everything is possible if we put our minds to it, I believe. Thank you very much, Dr. Iraqi. It's been a pleasure having you on the program. Thank you for your time and your contributions. We appreciate it.
Thank you and have a good evening.